Verbatim, a story of the Provisional World Administration. From the Adjustment Service Intake Notes, Style Guidance. Record the patient's words as spoken. Where the words are standard but the order is strange, record the order. The order is often the complaint. Part 1. From an Adjustment Service Closing Minute, Case 71-276. Subject, Associate, Meteorological Section, Combine 7 Regional Office. Referred under a minute of concern. Tone, recurring. 11 sessions. Finding, unspecified want, chronic, resolving. Subject reports the mornings shorter. Return to contentment this day. Follow-up, none required. Signed, Dr. L. Marsh, Fellow Analyst, the 13th of February, 397. The consulting room was warm. It was warm because the service had found, in its first decade, that a cold room adds 40 minutes to an intake, and the finding had been replicated, and after that the rooms were warm. There were 2 chairs, a low table, and a lamp with a paper shade. The lamp was tungsten. The forms were short. The associate from the meteorological section came at the 2nd hour on a Tuesday, 11 Tuesdays running. He was 26. His friend of 12 years had been transferred to the Baltic stations in the autumn, at the plan's ordinary speed, for the plan's ordinary reasons, and in the winter the auditory had minuted his tone. He was not in trouble. There is no trouble of that kind to be in. He was carrying something, and the wall had heard him carrying it. "I find the mornings long since the transfer," he said in the first session. It was the whole of his complaint. It was, by the measure of the forms, nothing, and she had sat with 4,000 intakes, and she knew it was the largest thing the forms could almost hold. She did what she did well. She let him talk about the Baltic stations until the stations were a place and not a wound. She moved the friendship, hour by hour, out of the place where it was a lost thing and into the place where it was a good thing that had happened, which was also true, which is why the method works. In the 9th session he laughed at something and was surprised at himself. In the 11th he said the mornings were getting shorter and looked at her with plain gratitude, and the gratitude was real, and so was the thing it thanked her for. "You have been very kind," he said. "It was no trouble," she said, and meant it. Her kindness was not a technique. It was also a technique. Both of these were true at once, and had been for 20 years, and the 2 truths had never quarrelled, because nothing had ever asked them to. She wrote the closing minute at her desk with the window open. Spring came early to Combine 7 that year. Below the window the tramway ran quiet on new rail, and the 4 o'clock shift went by under the poplars with their coats open, and somewhere down the block a refectory was proving the evening loaf, so that the whole street smelled faintly of warm bread. The amber loaf is a good loaf. The bread was warm, the trams ran, the figures were honest, nobody in the street below was hungry or afraid, and the dawn voice on the program the next morning was as kind as it had been every morning of her life. She filed the minute. Filing it was a pleasure. It is a pleasure to be good at a thing the world needs, and she was the best in the region, and the region did need her. The service exists because even a fed, warm, honest world leaves a remainder, and the remainder must be classified. The forms have a word for most of it. For the rest there is a phrase, unspecified want, chronic, and she had written it some hundreds of times, the way a good clerk writes anything, cleanly, without pressing. Her own file for the record was exemplary. Fellow Analyst, licensed 377, processed and confirmed. An analyst is analyzed first. That is the licensing condition. You are made right before you are permitted to make others right, and she had been made right, and for 20 years the making had held. Somewhere in her own dossier which she had clearance to read, there was a sealed page with a name on it, the name of a service child from the dough lines who had been confirmed directive at 6, an ordinary mercy of the sorting. She had never read the page. She remembered at times, not often, at the ordinary times, spring, the smell of proving bread, a hand and a hall song, and the flower smell of a woman the file said had never existed. Her profession had a phrase for remainders of that kind, and she knew the phrase, and it was hers to write, and she wrote it, cleanly, without pressing on other people. Part 2. From an adjustment service intake, Case 71-84. Citizen Tolyev, V. Dough line, Bakery 4, Combine 7. Referred, Steward's Minute, Bakery 4 Refectory, Recitation, Recurring, Drawing Attendance. Program kept on, seldom. Brightwater, moderate, Saturdays. Sleep, reported good. Quotas, met, all years on record. Preliminary finding, unspecified want, chronic. Signed, Dr. L. Marsh, Fellow Analyst, the 8th of April, 397. The intake form asked 11 questions. She had asked them 4,000 times. The man across the table was about 50, broad, clean-shaven, with the forearms of the dough line and flour worked so far into the creases of his knuckles that no washing was ever going to finish the job. When he sat down, the room smelled faintly of the dough line, and she noticed that she had noticed and set it aside, which is a thing an analyst is trained to do and does not expect to have to do twice. There was tea. There is always tea. The service found early that a cup in the hand shortens nothing and helps everything, and he took his with evident pleasure and said so. He said he slept well. It was the truth. He said he had no complaint of the refectory, the ration, the hours, the steward, or the work, that the work was good work, that he had wet his number at Bakery 4 at 14 and never wanted another floor. All of it was the truth. Nothing he said in the first hour was not the truth. She had rarely had a cleaner intake, and an intake that clean is itself a finding, though there is no box for it. He was, the steward's minute said, a poet. The word does not appear on any trade roll, and the minute used it apologetically in inverted commas. What the steward meant was that for 30 years, at floor weddings and Concord days, and the wetting of new numbers, it had been Tolyev who made the verses, spoken verses, in the Sparrow way, quick and warm and a little showy, and that this had never been minuted because there had never been anything to minute. Refectory verse is as legal as bread. What had changed, the minute said, was the matter. Since the winter he had taken to reciting, not verses of his own, passages, always the same passages, in plain flat standard, wrong for him, the minute said, like a man walking in boots borrowed from a bigger man, and the refectory had taken to listening, and the listening was drawing attendance from the second sitting, and the same passages had been heard at the tram stop, said back by a loader who had them wrong. Recurring, the minute said, drawing attendance. "Will you say one for me?" she said, "the way you say them at the refectory?" "You'll write it down," he said. It was not an objection. He said it the way a man remarks on weather. "I'm required to," she said. "Whatever you say to me here, I write as you say it. That is the rule, and I keep it." "Then I'll say it slow," said Tolyev kindly, "for your hand." And he folded his flour-creased knuckles on the low table and looked at the paper shade of the lamp and said, in plain flat standard, without pressing, "In the matter of boots I go to the bootmaker, and in the matter of bread to the baker. I ask each his art, and let neither settle what I love." She wrote it as spoken. The words were all standard: boot, bread, art, love. A child could pass it. There was nothing in it the ration did not cover. The order was strange. She looked at the order for a moment, and then she asked the fourth question on the intake form, which concerns the program, and he answered it truthfully, and the session ran out its hour in the ordinary way. At the door he stopped and read the room once, unhurried, the two chairs, the low table, the shelf of office volumes that every office shelves, the way a baker reads a proving loaf. "They give you the good chairs, then," he said with real approval, and went out. Under preliminary finding she wrote the phrase. There was no better phrase. There was, she would have said then. She was asked later at the review, and did say, nothing in the first session out of the way at all. Part 3. From an Adjustment Service Session Transcript, Case 71-284, Fourth Session. An extract, verbatim per rule. A science cannot take hold of one man, no more than of one rabbit. It is indifferent to both. It knows the idea of a man perfectly. It has never met one. Transcribed, Dr. L. Marsh, the 1st of May, 397. The sessions were Thursdays at the second hour. He came 12 times. He was an easy patient, which is to say, a hard one. The toolkit an analyst carries has 4 verbs: reframe, file, prescribe, return, and each of them wants a purchase, a complaint with edges, a want that can be named and then renamed until its owner can carry it. Tolyev's want had no edges. He was not grieving, he was not lonely. The floor loved him. She verified this without meaning to, from the way 3 separate appended minutes failed to keep the fondness out of official prose. He slept, ate, worked, balloted his 6 hours like everyone, stood his round of bright water on Saturdays. Asked what he wished were different, the 9th question. It opens more doors than the 8 before it together. He thought it over honestly and said the second proving oven ran hot on its north side and had for years, and that was the truth too, and the oven does run hot, and it is in the file. And session after session, once, sometimes twice, never more, he would fold his knuckles and look at the lamp and recite. She transcribed. The rule is absolute, and it is old, older than the service's name. The patient's words, as spoken, verbatim, because the words are symptoms, and a symptom paraphrased is a symptom lost. She was the best transcriber in the region. Her hand was even. A science is never finished. It is becoming. The learned man of today is the know-nothing of tomorrow, and on the day he calls himself finished, he is less than the child born that morning. She asked him professionally where the passages came from. "A book," he said, agreeable. "Which book?" "An old one." Had he read it? He turned that over. "It's not reading with me," he said at last. "It's keeping. Some men keep pigeons." Where was it kept, this book? "Ah," said Tolyev, and smiled at the lamp, and gave her, slow, for her hand. The whole office of science is to light the road. It was never to govern the walking. She wrote it as spoken. It was the 6th session. It was at the 6th session that she began to look forward, on Wednesday evenings, to the sound of it. She fixed the date afterwards, reading her own even hand. An analyst learns to audit herself, and she audited. Not to the matter. She would have said, and it would have been true, at least on the Wednesday, that the matter was symptom, catalogued, pending. To the sound, flat, plain, standard, in a doe-line voice, without pressing, in an order that was strange and old, and the word arrived by itself, in her own head, unminuted, right. Like a hall song. She could not have said like which hall song. There was a smell of flour off his knuckles, and a cadence, and somewhere under 20 licensed years, a hand she remembered against the record. Every Thursday at the second hour, in a warm room at the top of the ladder of care, the state's best analyst sat 2 feet from the dough line and wrote and did not press, and the wall heard nothing in her tone that any wall anywhere would file. From a steward's minute, Bakery 4 Refectory, appended to the case file without comment, the 22nd of May. The recitation continues at second sitting, notwithstanding treatment in progress. Attendance now includes floors 5 and 6 entire. On the 19th, the matter was heard sung, to a tune this office cannot name, by persons this office could not, in the crowd, determine. The words in song do not match the words spoken, and cannot be got to match. Referred for guidance. In the 7th session she did her job. It should be recorded. She recorded it herself, at the review, without being asked, that she did her job, all of it, well, for 11 weeks. She reframed. Perhaps the passages were his grief for the old floor verses, now that his verses drew less crowd than his keeping. He considered it fairly and put it down fairly, like a man declining a second helping he'd been offered out of kindness. She prescribed the program in the mornings for the company of it. He kept it on 3 mornings and reported, apologizing, that the dawn voice was a kind voice, and that it was no fault of the voice that a man's kettle boils the same without it. She filed. Her filings from those weeks are models of the pastoral form. They say, in the service's short, warm sentences, that the want was chronic, that the prognosis was fair, that treatment continued. Each one was true on the day it was signed, if you stood where the service stands and did not press. The church will not call itself a church. It will call itself a school, he gave her, in the 8th session, and on its benches sit not children only, but the eternal minor, the pupil who is never to graduate. She wrote it as spoken and did not press, and at 6 that evening, alone, she caught her own even hand copying the day's transcript for the registry, and understood that the registry rule and the refectory were the same fact wearing 2 coats. That every Thursday this man deposited in the one archive the world will keep forever, page after page of a book the world had no other place for, and that she, licensed, processed, confirmed, the service's best instrument, was the deposit mechanism. The thought arrived the way weather arrives. She examined it for professional error and found none. It was simply the case. The state cannot stop copying. It files everything, and he was speaking into the file. In the 10th session she asked him. She had drafted the question with care, and she asked it lightly, as if it were a small thing, which is the way the grades ask anything that is not small. A form question, Citizen Toliev. Nothing in it. You know that I write down what you say. Every word as you say it. You've known it since the first day. Is that why you say them to me? He looked at the pen, and then at her, with the mild pleasure he had for good bread and the north side of the second oven. Because you listen, he said. And then, because she had kept her pen up, waiting, and the room was quiet enough to hear the tram bell 2 streets down, and because you write. She recorded both answers. Neither was a finding. She sat afterwards past the hour, with the transcript in front of her, and could not determine, then, or at the review, or at any hour of any night since, and there have been many, whether she had been given a confession or a courtesy. The words were all standard. The order was strange. A man had told her the truth twice in 1 minute, and she could not file which truth it was, and her profession does not have, anywhere in its instruments, sealed or unsealed, a test to tell a poet from a strategist when both of them are kind. The 11th session fell in the last week of June. The refectory minutes were 4 by then, and the 4th was from Combine 12, across the river. The tune had crossed water. He recited once that day. He gave it slow for her hand, looking at the lamp, in the voice a man uses for weather that is coming and not his to send back. The more sincere the believer, the more dangerous the man. Zeal for the idea dries the heart toward living men. She wrote it as spoken. Her hand was even. She was the best transcriber in the region, and her hand was even. And she got up when the hour was done, and saw him to the door, and said the ordinary kind things, and the wall heard nothing in her tone, because by then she fixed this too afterwards. It is the one entry in her private chronology she is sure of. By then she was already, for the first time in her licensed life, composing for it. The 12th session fell on Concord Day, the 1st of Sol. The service keeps its hours on a festival, and he came in his Saturday coat, with the pageant bunting going up along the tramway, and the holiday loaf in the air of the whole street, and for the whole of the hour he recited nothing at all. They talked about the second oven. At the door he paused, with his hand on the frame, and read the room again: chairs, table, lamp, shelf. "Same books in every office," he said. "You ever read your shelf, fellow Marsh? A shelf will tell you what a room is for." "It's the same shelf everywhere, citizen," she said. "That's rather the point of it." "That's what I said," said Tolyev, and went out, and the door shut on the flower smell, and she filed the remark that evening in the box for rapport, tangent, humour, subjects, retained. She has read that box many times since. The hand is even. There is no finding in it. From an adjustment service case summary, case 71-284 for quarterly review. 12 sessions, cooperation, full, sleep, appetite, work record, unimpaired, quotas met throughout treatment. Finding, unspecified want, chronic, prognosis fair, continued outpatient adjustment recommended. The recitations have ceased. Signed, Dr. L. Marsh, Fellow Analyst, the 7th of Sol, 397. The summary is one paragraph. 5 of its sentences are true. The 6th is short, declarative, unremarkable in the file. It sits at the end, where a tired reviewer's eye wants a settled thing to land on, and she built it to sit there. She was good enough for that. She was good enough to falsify the summary, and she did falsify it on the night of the 7th of Sol, at her own desk, under the paper-shaded lamp, in her even hand, the first false sentence of a licensed life. The rule asks the summary to say what the sessions showed. The sentence failed to say it. That is the whole craft of forgery in a paper state, she found, and found it the way she found everything that year, without wanting the knowledge. Not spectacle, no seal broken, no page removed. One line that fails to say what the rule requires. No one checked the summary against her transcripts. No one has ever needed to check an analyst's summary against an analyst's transcripts. The transcripts and the summary are the same hand. That is the system, and it worked. Part 4. From a Central Registry Disposition, Case 71-84, Citizen Tolyev, V. Dowline, Bakery 4, Combine 7. The Gifted Worker Statute is cited. Treatment concluded. Reconciled, the 21st of Sol, 397. Signatures, 2. The docket came down the day after the summary went up, which is to say the docket was moving before the summary could have been read, which is to say she has done this arithmetic in the dark more times than the file has pages, that her sentence changed nothing, was audited by no one, saved no one, and sits in the record to this day, believed. The statute does not consult analysts. The statute consults the refectories, and the refectories were singing, floors 5 and 6 entire, and across the river, to a tune no office could name, words that could not be got to match any transcript. A recitation can be treated. Her whole science is the treating of it. There is no treatment for a tune. The gifted worker statute is short. She had known of it for 20 years the way one knows a form title, and in 20 years she had seen it cited twice, both times in other analysts' cases, both times as a line in a docket, and she had not looked at either docket longer than a docket asks to be looked at. It provides for the service grader whose gifts are found past the sorting age, promotion after suitable tests, where the gift is disciplined, and where the gift is judged ill-disciplined and loyal to its own class. The statute's words are exact, and exactly too, and she has carried them since. Reconciliation. The word is from the ledger family. Everyone knows what the ledger words mean. The clerk who brought the docket to her office was young and kind, and waited without hurrying her, because the registry teaches its clerks that a disposition is a heavy paper, and a signing officer is entitled to a moment. The disposing officer's signature was already on it, a senior fellow of the service, a good man. She knew him. He had signed legibly, as a man signs a painful duty, because it was one. Below his line was a line for the analyst of record. The form is short. Its shortness is not cruelty. Nothing in the room was cruelty. The room was warm. The clerk was kind. The duty was sincere. She knew the doctrine. She had been processed into the doctrine, an amputation performed once, so that a class of men who cannot be promoted and cannot be returned shall not be left to suffer wanting. By every instrument the world possesses, the mercy was real. She thought of not signing. The thought had no shape. There is no form on which a thought like that can be entered, no word in standard that it answers to, no office where it goes. It stood in the warm room for a moment like a fourth person, unfileable, and the clerk waited kindly, and the lamp burned, and she took up the pen she transcribed with. The same pen. She noticed that, noticed herself noticing the way she had been trained. She signed the line for the analyst of record. Her hand was even. In the file it is a docket line and 2 signatures. One of them is sorrowful. The file does not say which. She rode the tram home at the shift hour with her coat open under the poplars. The evening proving was on, and the street smelled of warm bread the whole way, because the world is genuinely good at bread. It was the year's best loaf, that summer's amber, and the figures on it were honest, and the queue at the refectory door stood easy and unafraid in the long light, and a child at the tram stop was teaching a smaller child to count in turned words, eno, out, earth, the way children have since the playgrounds invented privacy. Nobody sang. It was a Thursday. At the second hour of that afternoon, for the first time in 12 weeks, she had sat in her consulting room with no one across the table, and transcribed nothing, and the room had smelled only of the lamp. Part 5. The intake queue was longer by September. No form explained it. The service's own figures, which are honest, showed the rise beginning in the quarter the case closed and continuing without plateau. Referrals for tone, referrals for recitation, referrals for— the category was new, a regional improvisation, ratified later, singing, recurrent, matter unclear. In the common room the seniors called it a pending further data sort of autumn, with the deprecating laugh the phrase is built to carry, and increased the session allocations, and were not wrong and not lying. Further data was exactly what none of them had. She took her share of the new cases and did her job. She was still the best in the region. That is in the figures too. She heard the tune for the first time in October, in the queue at her own refectory, hummed, 4 bars, unpressed, by a fitter with his eyes on the serving hatch, a man thinking about his dinner and not about music at all. It was nothing. It was 4 bars of nothing, a dough-line cadence, the kind of tune a floor keeps the way it keeps a way of stacking trays. She stood in the warm queue in the smell of the amber loaf, and everything in her went quiet, because she knew the cadence. She had heard it, slow, for her hand. The words, when the words reached her weeks later, third hand, mangled, alive, did not match her transcripts and could not be got to match. When a chief speaks of heaven, the song said approximately, unfilably, look to your wool. No transcript in the registry says that. She checked. She had clearance, and she checked, at night, alone, and it was the checking that finished her, because she read her own even hand for 4 hours in the records annex and understood what she was holding. Pages of the largest collection of the book in standard on earth, the registry's own, verbatim, certified, permanent, filed as symptom out of 100 consulting rooms because the state cannot stop copying, and the newest of those pages indexed under a case number that was closed with 2 signatures, and she had written every word of those, and had been, whether he meant her for it or only met her at it, the instrument. Whether he meant her for it, she has both answers. She keeps both. It is the one file she has learned to leave open on purpose, and leaving it open cost her more training than the forgery. It was December before she read her shelf. She would have said, if any instrument could have asked her, that she took the volume down for a reason of hygiene. It is the book of her own trade's foundations, Aptitude Tables, Volume 3, the thick, buff spine, third from the left, in every office of the grades on earth. The volume every office must shelve, and no examiner has opened since his own examinations. And her examinations were 24 years gone, and a rise without plateau was in the figures, and an analyst audits herself. That is what she would have said. What is true is that a dead man had told her a shelf will tell you what a room is for, and she had filed it under humour, and the box would not stay shut. The tables run to page 410. The appendix begins at 411 and is not tables. It is examination shorthand, dense, even, hand-inked leaf upon leaf, and sewn in with a binder's own thread, ruled to pass at arm's length for printed matter, an older hand than hers, and not one hand only, corrected in places, a second hand against a third, the way scholars true up a text no one may own. The running title, in shorthand, is dull enough to bore a records auditor to safety, and did, for no auditor in the history of the volume has ever reached page 411, Notes on the History of Authority. She read all night. The tungsten lamp is rated for it. The service buys good lamps. She read passages she had transcribed at the second hour on Thursdays, word for word as he had said them, set down in shorthand years before he said them, his cadences, in print older than him. He had kept them the way some men keep pigeons, and they had kept him. And she read past them, into country he had never recited, and somewhere past the middle of the night she reached the passage that has governed everything she has done since, and will govern everything she does, in whatever remains to her. And she read it the way you read a diagnosis with your own name at the top. Whatever respect I hold for a man's honesty, I keep no absolute faith in any person. Such a faith would make me a slave, the instrument of another man's will, and the ruin of my own reason. Her tools sat in her 2 hands as she read it. She is the service's best. She could take a floor of strangers and, in 11 Tuesdays each, make them love this book, the way the commissariat makes the world love the morning. She knows the levers. She was processed by the levers. Belief is a caseload like any other. And the book she was holding, in the state's own shorthand, in the margins of the state's own tables, forbids her flatly, in the oldest sentence it has, to do any such thing to any living man. This is the whole of what she believes now, and it forbids its own planting, and she has understood, since the night of the reading, that she is the one instrument on earth the book cannot be trusted to, which is, she has also understood, exactly why it fell to her hand, since the world has no way to give a thing except to an instrument. The last page of the appendix is unfinished. The shorthand stops mid-passage, mid-sentence, and no hand ever came back to it. She knows what the songs keep about that there was a printing once, whole, and that it was lost entire, and that no one, on either side of any wall, has ever put a name to the hand that made it. Whether the hand that stopped on this page was that one, or one of its many copyists, the page does not say. It is an open file. She does not close files anymore. There was provision wrapper paper in her desk drawer, as there is in every desk drawer on earth, buff, strong, absorbent to a good pen, and undated, and bearing no field for a date. The one paper in a paper state on which nothing can be made to contradict a dossier. She took out one sheet and squared it on the blotter, and took up the pen she transcribes with, and, 24 years of training moving her hand to the top right corner, where the date goes, where the date always goes, did not date it. One line that fails to say what the rule requires. It gets easier, she has found. That is the thing she confesses, on the nights when both answers to the open file sit with her in the office where the wall listens. Not the fear, the ease. She wrote in examination shorthand, in her even hand, slow, for whatever hand would copy hers. In the matter of boots I go to the bootmaker, and in the matter of bread to the baker. I ask each his art, and let neither settle what I love. She wrote it as spoken. The order is the complaint. Then she squared the page in the drawer beneath the intake forms, and turned off the good lamp, and said aloud, alone, in a contented voice, for the wall, that she found the mornings getting shorter,